Alright, so now we're ready to start recording our vocal drum sounds. So it says on the task sheet we need to record a kick, snare, hi-hat, toms and crash. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this drum loop that we've got here and we're going to recreate that drum loop with the sound of drum sounds that we're going to make with our mouth vocally. So we're going to need to record some audio for this. So I've got set up here my large diaphragm condenser microphone on a microphone stand with a pop shield. So that's going to allow me to record the best possible quality audio for this type of thing. So I would recommend to you, if it's possible, go downstairs into the studio, set up a large diaphragm condenser on a microphone stand with a pop shield. Going to give you a much better quality recording. If it's not possible to do that, if the studio is not available, you can always grab a moving coil dynamic mic and just plug it in to the audio interface of the computer that you're working on in the EMP suite upstairs. It is possible to get it done that way, not going to give you as good a result, so up to you. So if you are upstairs in the EMP suite and you've got your microphone, you need to plug that into the audio interface on the computer. So there's a little Focusrite Sapphire sitting next to you there. Just plug it into one of the two inputs on the front of that. So that gets your microphone plugged into the computer, getting audio coming through the interface. Now we need to assign an audio track in Logic to record that audio signal onto. So we're going to create a new track, and it's going to be a mono audio track. It's just one microphone, one audio signal. It's just one mono signal that we need to record. So here's my audio track. First thing I do is I label it. I'm going to call mine vocal drums. Vox being the abbreviation for vocals, of course. And then I also need to set here on the inputs and outputs for that track. I need to set which input I've plugged into. So do I plug into input 1 or input 2? So as soon as I set that and record enable the track, you can see, hello, check 1, 2. I'm getting a good healthy level here. It's not distorting, so I've adjusted my gain right. I'm ready to do some recording. So what I'm going to do now, you guys might just want to leave me to it. I'll mute that so I can't hear it. I'm going to record some vocal drum sounds for a little bit, so I'll come back when I've finished. Here we go. Right, so I've recorded a whole bunch of different vocal drum sounds here. Some of them good, some of them not so good. So now I need to go through and edit out, pick the best one or two of each, and create little samples out of them. Just a single audio file of just the ones that I want. So there's a whole bunch of different kick drums here. I can double click the region, opens up the sample editor. And the other way we can do that, we can choose the region and click here on this tab which says sample editor, which opens that up for us. So I can, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here so I can see everything a bit more clearly. I can have a listen on the sample editor to my kick drum sounds. Listen through. Nothing really takes my fancy here. Oh. So that's the one I want to keep. So I want to make this into its own audio file. So instead of having an audio file with a bunch of rubbish on it, I'm just going to select my best one, select the audio there. Yeah, bit closer I think. That sounds good to me. So I want to make this selection here its own audio file. So I can come up here, I can go audio file, save selection as, and I'm going to save this just into my EMP folder. I'm going to create a new folder called drum samples in there. So I've got a folder here, and this is going to be my kick drum. So that looks good and ready to save that as a WAV file at the original sample rate and bit depth. Save. Cool, so I'm going to do the same for all of my vocal drum sounds. My snare drums, I need 3 snare drums, a loud one, a medium one and a quiet one, so I can velocity layer them in a minute. So depending how hard I press the key, it's going to trigger different samples. So I'm just going to go through all of the different, here's my hi-hats, sounds that I've recorded, and just highlight the ones I want to keep and save them, save the selection as a new audio file in this folder here called drum samples. So I'll be back with you in a few minutes after I've gone through and done all of those. Alright, so I've been right through and I've edited up all my different vocal drum sounds, picked out the best ones, saved them as a new selection, as its own audio file. So now I've got a folder full of all of my individual little samples of audio files ready to load into the sampler. So I'm just going to finish using this track that I recorded on now. I'll just mute it for the time being. So we'll go to the sampler track here, which is my virtual instrument track, software instrument track. And I'm going to open up the software sampler EXS24. So this is just a blank EXS24 at the moment, doesn't have any samples loaded into it. So let's get into the business end of the EXS24, behind the scenes, under the hood, by clicking the edit button here. That shows us the parts we want to see. One thing to be aware of when you first open up this screen, there's this view tab here. So you can switch certain elements and components on and off. So depending who's been using the computer before you, you may not necessarily be seeing everything on your EXS24. So make sure you click View All, just to make sure that it's actually showing you all of the available options. Otherwise that could you could be missing bits. Sweet, so the first thing we need to do is we need to define a zone. So for each sample that we load in, we need to set up a what's known as a key zone or a key group. It's just called a zone on the EXS24, which defines the lowest key and the highest key that sample is going to be assigned to. So we need to set up a zone for each sample that we load in. So we go here, we go zone, new zone, and that creates a new zone here for us. I'm going to name this first zone kick, because it's going to be for my kick drum. And then I get to load in the audio file for that zone. So we just go load audio sample here. I'm just going to navigate to my drum samples folder that I've created, and it's got a list here of all of the samples I've just made audio files for. So here's my kick drum. I can preview it here to make sure it's the right one. Yeah, that's the right one, alright. We go open. So that's pulled that, that little audio sample in, and it's set it up for this zone. So at the moment, the key range of my zone over here has a low key of C-2 and a high key of G8. So it's applying my sample across the entire keyboard. So I can play at really low or really high. So I don't need my kick drum sample spread across the whole keyboard. So I'm going to adjust the low key range. I'm just going to have my kick drum on the key C1. So the low key and the high key are going to be C1. So that's the only note, or the only key on the keyboard that my kick drum is going to be on. Of course, you can just grab this blue box here as the other way of adjusting the low key and high key. You can see the numbers moving here as I adjust that. So on the key C1, I've got my kick drum. This here, pitch key. So this is the key that it's going to play back at its original pitch. So at the moment, it's going to play back at its original pitch on the key C3. So when I'm playing it down here, it's going to play it back really low, much lower than it was originally recorded. So I need to adjust this to being C1, so that when I play the key C1, I know that it's playing back at the original pitch that it was recorded at. Cool. What other parameters do I get here? Other options. I can adjust the pitch of the note by, this is a semitone, so it's like from a white key to a black key on the keyboard, or in between semitones I can go fine. So I can play around with the pitch and get it sounding how I like it. I'm just going to leave mine at the original pitch. I think it sounds pretty good. Turn the volume up and down, louder or quieter than it was originally recorded. I can pan my sample from left to right here. 0 being in the middle, which is where I want my kick drum. Won't worry about those ones at the moment. Key range, low key, high key, we know. Over here we've got playback pitch, so that's going to pitch it across the keyboard. One shot, that means when I press the key, it's going to play the entire sample from start to finish, regardless of whether I hold the key down for the entire duration or not. So that's quite good for drums. I like that. Reverse obviously plays the sample backwards. Groups we don't need to worry about for the moment. Velocity we'll come back to. Start and end time, so I can adjust the start and end time here. Play around, have a listen. Maybe I want to trim a little bit of noise off the front or off the end. And we'll do some looping a bit later on as well. So that's all we need to worry about for the moment. So we need to do the same process for all of the different drum sounds. We need to create a new zone. Whoops. New zone. This zone is going to be called a snare, and it's going to be my loud snare. So I'm going to load in the sample. Here's my loud snare here. I can have a preview, make sure that's it. I'm going to assign that to the key D1. Whoops. And the low key and the high key are also going to be D1. So here's my loud snare on the key D1. We need to velocity layer our snares, meaning depending on how hard you hit the key, plays a different sample. So that's my loud, aggressive snare drum sample. So I'm going to switch on over here. There's a thing that says velocity range, so I'm going to turn that on. So that sample only plays when it receives a velocity value, MIDI velocity value, between 100 and 127. So only when I hit the key really hard is it going to play that particular sample. So I'm going to set up here now. I'm going to create another new zone, and this is going to be my snare medium. So it's a slightly quieter sounding sample that I've made. It sounds like this. So it's not as aggressive or as loud. So I'm going to load that in on the same key, D1. It's going to be pitched on the key D1, and it's going to have a low key and a high key of D1. So you can see here it's stacked those two samples up on top of each other. So this medium snare drum is going to be velocity layered. So we'll go velocity range. Let's move this over. Switch velocity range on. So this medium snare drum is going to be between 99. So when it receives a velocity value of between, let's say, 60 and 99, it's pretty medium. So if it receives a velocity of 60 to 99, it'll play the medium sample, or a louder velocity, 100 to 127, it plays the loud sample. So that's velocity layering. We'll do one more. So new zone for my quiet snare sample. It sounds a bit like this. I'm going to load that sample in. So it's just a little snare. Going to put that on the same key as the other ones. Pitch it on that key. Low key and high key are also going to be the key D1. So the key D1 now has 3 samples, velocity layered on it. Turn this on, velocity range here, and I'm going to set it from 0 to 59. It's going to play that sample. So I've got the whole velocity range covered there. Depending how hard I press the key, it's going to trigger a different sample. I also want to turn a one shot on for my snare samples, so it plays the whole sample through. So it's just a process now of going through and loading in all of my vocal drum samples. Same process as what I've just been doing there. So I'll go ahead and do that and be with you in a moment.